Mike Check is Shantae Arnett. You guys have tuned in to a POC POV, the discussion series where we talk about the Black experience, my journey in it, and my perspective on it. We're going to be talking about what it's like being Black in America and everything that comes with it, good and bad. If you've tuned into my channel and you're new for the first time, thank you so much for coming by and giving me a little bit of your time. If you could, please like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and do all of the things that your favorite YouTubers tell you to do in their videos. If you're returning to my channel, hey girl, welcome back. And thank you for coming back and giving me a little bit more of your time. I truly appreciate you. Today, this episode is about S.O.S. And I'm not talking about the Rihanna song. I'm talking about systematic oppression setups. I'm talking about systematic oppression setups. I'm gonna just jump into the definition. By my definition, because as far as I know, this isn't an actual term, but I coin terms based on what I see. I just did a whole video on majority privilege. So yeah, today is the coin terms day of episodes. Systematic oppression setups, by my definition, societal constructs that have been put in place by the powers that be to create and enforce a classist structure for the people of color in this country. Okay? This video, I'm going to give some detailed examples of what I personally think are some examples of S.O.S, systematic oppression setups, that have kept Black people in a state of S.O.S for almost 250 years. Mind you, the country is roughly 235 years old, right? So I'm getting ready to really jump into some things. And this video might be a long one, so I need y'all to lock in while I clock in, and Black people stick with me because I'm speaking for y'all today, okay? And I'm speaking for all of the things. I may miss a few, so if I miss some at the end of this video, comment and let me know. But I'm really getting ready to speak on some things that have affected Black people in this country, and I'm really getting ready to give you a real POC POV. So let's get into some things, okay? All the things that I'm going to talk about today are examples of systematic oppression setups that have left us in a state of SOS in this country, right? Let's start with our entrance into this country, okay? Ancestors of Black people were brought here under force and false pretenses in the 1700s. The foundation of America was not built for equality. Black people were never brought here to be equal. We were brought here as slaves to build the country for the white man, okay? And in that regard, a lot of legislature that this country was built on is still in place. So people wonder why. Like, I know you guys hear all the time about crazy laws you don't realize still exist. Yeah, those things exist because people aren't going back and repealing them or overturning them, right? Like, I keep saying all the time that we aren't far enough removed from the oppression to start seeing real change. But we are in the beginning steps. That I can appreciate, but the fight is far from over, okay? What has been changed and has stuck in this country has only been changed since the 1960s, okay? A lot of the equality that Black people were given in this country was not given to us until the 1960s. It is 2019. If you're my age, I was born in 1991. The 60s don't feel like that far away for you. Do you know what I mean? Like, even today, like the 90s feel like it was yesterday. So to imagine that Black people began to start being treated like equal people in this country means that in the 60s means that we were only truly being treated like equals 54 years ago. Think about it like that. Think about it like that. You have $1. You have 100 cents. 54 of that cents is now gone. Right? Think of how much time that is. Like 54 cents is a lot, but it's not a lot. You know what I'm saying? It's like America is roughly 243 years old. So, like I said, we are nowhere near removed from the oppression that we've been entrapped in all these years. We've only started being treated like equal members of this country in the 60s. 54 years ago, we started being treated like people. Like real people in this country. So full and complete change is going to be an uphill battle for a long time. I can acknowledge and understand that. Like I keep saying, we are nowhere near far enough removed from the oppression that we faced over the majority of the time that this country has been operating to actually see majority change. You know what I'm saying? We haven't been removed far enough for things to completely change. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't keep the battle going. And the way we were brought into this country is just one example. I'm going to list several and I'm going to talk about them in grave detail. The next one, I'm getting ready to piss some of y'all off. Some of y'all black people not going to like me for what I'm getting ready to say, but I brought receipts and I brought proof in the form of links that I will be putting in the description box. There's going to be several that go along with this video. And so make sure that you guys not only watch the video, but click the links in the description box to do your research on all the things that I'm talking about, because I wouldn't bring it to you if I didn't have some kind of history or knowledge or research on it. Okay? Christianity. We can talk about my specific spiritual preferences in another video, probably on In My Queer View, because that's partially where my ambivalence with a higher power goes or starts. But it's definitely where the disdain with organized religion for me starts. But I do want to address my thoughts on how I believe Christianity was not meant for black people. I don't think that Christianity, or the Christianity that we are celebrating, or not even celebrating, subscribing to in this country, was not meant for black people, because I think it is a systematic oppression setup. Slavery was given, not slavery, but Christianity was given to slaves as a God to pray to with the principles that fit within white supremacy. Think about it. We were snatched away from this country, okay? I have a hard time. We were snatched and pulled into this country. I have a hard time reconciling that I'm supposed to find my savior in a religion that is co-signed and championed by slave masters, all the way down to today's bigots who use said religion to justify hatred. From what I've gathered via my own research, Christianity was never meant for black people, and it was given as a doctrine and a God for black people to pray to as a beacon of hope, but also as a leash for black people. It's like, okay, we're giving you some hope, thinking that you're going to pray to a God that's going to get you out of this, but this is the God that we gave you. And the God that we're telling you to pray to, you're praying to that God is telling you to serve us. Okay? Think about it. Slaves were snatched away from their native countries where Christianity was not their base religion. Okay? A lot of Africans came over to this country were originally Muslim, or I've also read about voodooism being a traditional African spiritual practice. But Christianity was not the base of African culture. It was not the religion when we were over in our lands doing what we were doing. When we were brought to the New World, our ancestors found refuge in the only God that they could get their hands on. You know, the God taught to them in churches, those were the churches their masters allowed them to go to. I mean, let's really be distinct about it. Do you think that if Black people brought to this country weren't allowed to learn how to read and write, that they would be allowed to practice religion freely? Which, excuse me if I'm not mistaken, was one of the reasons why the English came over to America in the first goddamn place. Oh, okay. My bad. I'm not a historian or nothing. If you think that we weren't allowed to read, write, do anything that wasn't subservient or serving to the white man, that we were allowed to praise a God that they didn't have some sort of mandate or control over? Think about it. We weren't allowed to read or write. Most of us didn't know how. So what we were given was given to us by the white man. The religious doctrine that we were given, the Bible that we were taught out of, the word that we were taught was taught by white preachers and white slave masters who wanted to give us a God to pray to, but also wanted to keep the slaves in line with their master, dog. To further expand on that, refer to an NPR article with an interview from Alan Dwight Callahan, who wrote the book, The Talking Book, African Americans and the Bible, which is written in the specific context of this, country. Like I said, there's going to be a few links that are going to be in the description box to give you full factual context on the things that I'm saying, because if I sat back and I read every single article that I linked to my videos, most of my videos would be 2 and 3 hours long. And I don't have the platform to do shows like the Joe Budden podcast yet, where I can do 3-hour videos or 3-hour podcasts and people will just sit and watch. I creep videos in at an hour, and I pray y'all sit and watch the whole thing because everything I'm saying is important. But in retrospect, I realized I should have done that in my Stacey Dash episode of a POC POV. I should have just wrapped that video and told y'all to go check out the link of the 30 inventors with things created by Black people that you use daily. I should have just wrapped the video, because if you look at it in that episode, everything that I had to say, I said in the first half of the video. The video was like an hour and a minute long. I said everything that I needed to say in the first 30 minutes, and then the other half hour was just me reading the article and commenting about it. So I'm going to give y'all the chance to do your own research and give you guys the tools to do your own research, but I'm not going to hold that much of your time. I'm going to explain what I need to explain and get the hell out of here so y'all can click these links and do y'all reading for yourselves. But I wanted to highlight Alan's book because I'm going to order a copy of it. And I read the interview, I went over the interview, and the things that he was saying in the interview led me to include him in this video about points that I already had. So, back to it. Another example, Black history in the media. I did another entire video about this where mainstream media focuses on the people who died for the advancement of our race, which I said in episode 6 of this series, advancement is not necessarily the word, because Advancement is not necessarily the word because we're only getting the rights that were due to us as whole ass people. Like, we're only getting the rights as black people that we deserve as being citizens of this country. Like I said before, we have contributed much more to America's society than the number of black people murdered fighting on behalf of the rights that are our birthrights, right? What I mean by that is there have been more contributions to the country of America. There have been more significant contributions by black people. Sorry, sorry, y'all, we got cut off. But as I was saying, there is more contributions that black people have made to this country than the number of activists that they show being murdered fighting on our behalf. Like I said, we were thought of as 2/3 of a human in this country for a long time, and I believe that the systematic oppression setups are ways of reinforcing that mentality through heavily disguised legislature and structuring. I don't know why I'm having such a hard time saying the word legislature today, but I believe that SOS's systematic oppression setups were created to reinforce the mentality of us being less than the white man through heavily disguised legislature and structuring. And honestly, the structuring is more disguised than the legislature because we've had legislature put in place by this country that specifically puts us as a second-class citizen to the white man. Let's move on to segregation, shall we? The Jim Crow laws. I'm going to read the definition, and I may expound on it a little bit, but I'm going to move on because at the end of the day, Jim Crow was taught in history books. Jim Crow was taught in schools. But I'm not surprised. So y'all can read about that. I also have a link attached to it, but I'm going to read the definition that pretty much sums up everything that I need to say. By definition, the Jim Crow laws were state and local laws that were enforced racial segregation in the southern United States. All were enacted in the late 19th century and early 20th centuries by white Democratic dominated state legislators after the Reconstruction period. The laws were enforced until 1965. This is why a lot of people don't. You know what? Just read the article. Because at the end of the day, what I'm going to say about that is vote for your interests, no matter where they lie. At the end of the day, it's not about being a Democrat, being a Republican. It's not about the title. It's about the policies that they plan on executing under it. So if the majority of the policies that you align with fall on a side that you may or may not be comfortable saying that you identify with, okay, that's fine. That's why most people vote independent. That's why most people vote this, that, and the third. They don't vote Democrat or Republican, or they have, things that they vote on both sides. But the Jim Crow laws were specifically created to enforce racial segregation and put black people under white people societally on a totem pole. Okay? Click the link. Voting. Because voting is always going to be a hot topic issue. I just did a whole rant about how black people need to get y'all asses to the polls and make sure that you're voting for every single election and not just the president and the vice president. You need to vote within your local government as well, because your voices need to be heard on a universal, across the board level. Think about it. Let me give y'all some education real quick, because I feel like a lot of people don't know and aren't using the technology that we're blessed with to do your research. Black people weren't technically given the right to vote until 1870. Well, actually, I I misread my note. Black people were technically given the right to vote in 1870, right? We were technically given the right to vote in 1870, but because of legislature, and this is where the disguise comes in, for when I said heavily disguised legislature, but because of things like the grandfather clause, a loophole used to keep descendants of slaves out of the polls, because that wasn't stricken down until 1915, we were still kept from the table. Okay? Remember what I said earlier in the video. Black people did not begin to be equalized in this country until the 60s. Okay? We were given the right to vote in 1870, but because of the grandfather clause that was used as a way to keep descendants of slaves out of the polls, well, how do you say black people can't vote without saying black people can't vote? Oh, well, if you're a descendant of a slave, clearly all descendants of slaves are black. Whoa! Crazy notion, right? Okay. So at that time, and I'm sure that there were, cultures of people who were enslaved that weren't black. I'm just speaking specifically to my own experience right now. But the descendants of slaves were black. So if you're a descendant of a slave, that means you also are black or mixed, depending on what slave master your family had. Okay. That wasn't stricken down until 1950. So 1915. So we were kept off of the table. The problem is, you would think that after 1915, after the grandfather clause was struck, that we would be given all full rights to vote. No, boo. The Voting Rights Act didn't pass until 1967. We got Motown going on, all other type of things happening in this world. Think about it. The 60s, 1967. 67. Think about what people were doing in the 60s. Like, think about the 60s. That's not that far away. That's not that far back. Like I said, that's like 54 years ago, 50, 60 years ago. That's not far back. That's a lifetime. That's not that far back. Like, that's not there are people today still living who you can go to who lived through this directly and can tell you personal experiences of this shit happening. It's not like we can only learn about this stuff through a history book. You can go back and talk to people who lived through it. That's how close it was. Moving on, because there are more topics that I want to even further push this home with. Marriage. Interracial marriage was against the law until 1969, when the Supreme Court issued the Loving versus Virginia decision. Quick sidebar. I wonder if there's any connection between the Loving and the Loving versus Virginia case and Cynthia Loving, aka Lil Mo, aka Tap In, aka She Needs to Bring R&B Divas Back, aka Superwoman, aka Sing a Bitch Under the Table, aka Blue Hair Bandit. Anyway, sorry, I just got caught up in a tangent because I read that and I was like, Loving? I wonder if this is like Cynthia Loving's great-great-grandmother. Anyway, not great-great-grandmother, but great-grandmother maybe. I don't know. Anyway, wondering if there was a connection. I say all that to say, it was illegal for white people to marry us. It was illegal for y'all to fall in love and want to spend y'all life with little old us, little old black us, little old colored us. It was illegal until 1969. The 60s, people. Think about this. These are all systematic oppression setups. Things that were put in place to restrict, mandate, and regulate us. I need y'all to, excuse me, I'm starting to get myself hiccups. I need y'all to tap in and really understand where I'm coming from, because we as a country have to stand on the shoulders of the people who were oppressed and show that their suffering was not in vain, that their pain was not in vain, that the murders of the people that they teach us on Black History Month, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, all the people who suffered and put their lives on the line for us during the Civil Rights Movement, also in the 60s, were not in vain, that they did it for a reason. We cannot let all of their hard work fall by the wayside because there is still more work to do. Just because the Civil Rights Act passed does not mean that Black people are equal in this country. Please understand me, because I'm starting to get emotional about it. I'm legit starting to get emotional about it, because it frustrates me, the fact that we even have to have these conversations, and the fact that I have to have these conversations with Black people, the fact that I have to have these conversations with people who don't know their own history but expect to be treated equally by the white people who created the history that you don't even bother to research. I'm sorry, they're not going to teach you it in schools. They create it, they enforce it, and then it's up to you to find your way out of the maze and see what you've just been walking through. It's time for you to look at who's holding that teacup and get your ass out. I keep focusing in on education because I genuinely and wholeheartedly feel like America is stunting the morale of the Black youth by teaching them the heroes that we have to look up to in this country are sacrifices for the African American agenda to become the equal humans we were all meant to be. This is just my opinion, but it's also a strong observation. This is just something that I see. It feels like America is only teaching Black students in general, but it's only teaching Black students certain things about their country so that they can have an opinion of themselves that is less than the white man. And it's teaching white students that Black people are less than them because this is the history of them in our country. This is the history of us in their country, quote unquote. It's just my opinion. I don't have a link or a fact to back that up, but look at your history and look at what you were taught in schools and look at what you were taught about Black people when you were growing up. Look at the Black history that you were taught and go back and ask your grandmother. Go back and ask your mother. Go back and ask your aunties. Go back and ask your grandmother, what Black history were they taught in schools? Because think about it. We were taught Black history that started in the 60s, right? It was slavery and then the Civil Rights Act. Apparently nothing happened in between then, besides the Emancipation Proclamation. Apparently nothing happened between slavery in the 60s except the Emancipation Proclamation and the Harlem Renaissance, according to Black history. But go back and ask some elders what they were taught in schools before the Civil Rights Movement was even a thing. Go back and ask your grandmother what she learned about Black history in school. Go back and ask your mom or your dad what Black history they were taught in schools. And that is going to tell you every single thing that I'm saying about America stunting the morale of the Black youth. From the foundations of education, I see it. Moving on. The prison system. It is no secret that the prison system has an imbalanced system of sentencing compared to white people with the same or similar charges. Black people have historically been reported getting harsher sentences for similar or equal crimes. You see the memes on Facebook and on Instagram all the time about a Black person and a white person being lined up next to each other, and they list this person's record, they list the black person's record, they list the white person's record, and they'll show you, you know, the black person is a first-time offender and they commit the same crime as a white person who has an extensive record, and this person gets 20 years in prison for the same crime that this person got 2 years probation. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, we see it all the time. It's not something that I have to break down. It's not something that I have to give you much history on. You see it every day. You can read it in the paper and see exactly what I'm talking about. There's a conspiracy theory that has gone along with that for a long time. There's a conspiracy theory that's gone along with that for a long time that I believe to be true. I believe that the prison system was designed as a disguise for modern day slavery. I think that the prison system, the reason why there are an extensive difference in the minorities that are behind bars for longer amounts of times, for lesser sentences, or whatever the case may be, the reason why the imbalance of Caucasian to minority prisoners is so high is because it's a way of regulating the population and instead of just killing us off, they would rather just lock us all up and force us to work for pennies on the penny. Pennies on the penny, pennies on the penny. Honey, as labor to create things for this country, right? It's no secret that prisons have all these like industrial factories and things that prisoners work in to create these products. And I believe that the reason why the imbalance of minority versus non-minority prisoners is so different is because the prison system is designed as a setup for modern day slavery. And the way to disguise that is to redirect affirmative action. It's like, yeah, we don't necessarily want to lock up all the white people, but some of y'all are out here doing shit that's crazy. So we're going to have to put some of y'all in jail and give y'all some crazy ass sentences for some shit so that it won't look like we're just completely biased. Even though eventually we see that that's what it is, they don't want it to look like it just right off the bat, right? So the disguise is, you know, hey, there are white people in here too. White people get locked up too every single day. But are all white people actually punished to the full extent of the law the way that African Americans are? I'm just saying. I'm also not saying that black people have never received a break in the judicial system. I have. I've made mistakes and I've received my breaks. But in a general sense, we can't talk about the exceptions to the rule when we're stating the majority issue. Like, at the end of the day, the exceptions to the rule don't combat the majority issue enough to play a significant role in the conversation, is what I'm saying. So in closing, I want to bring this to a close with one last example that inspired another video that I shot today. I shot another essays with essay this morning, and it was about majority privilege and people who are not affected by social injustice and racial gender oppression. People who don't subscribe to those pains or who aren't subjected to those type of narratives, shaming people who get offended by it, or people who want to control how the oppressed express themselves on issues that the majority feel are not issues. I shot another video on that today, and I want to bring a little bit of that into this video because it is prevalent and it actually has developments as recent as the last 24 hours. And it also plays a part into the legislature part that I want to work on, that I wanted to bring into the narrative of this video. I want to talk about black hair for a second. And while it may seem like a small point in the grand scheme of everything else that I've talked about in this video, it is another systematic oppression setup that has been set up to restrict the way that we express ourselves and that we present in this country. Black hair has been regulated and controlled by the powers that be for years, to a point of people being reprimanded on jobs, put out of schools, and have been reduced to being labeled as inappropriate for specific hairstyles that reflect the natural content and texture of our hair. Examples of this are the Black beauty movement that had to happen in the 60s. I've spoken about this in another video where I spoke on Kathleen Cleaver and how she affected my presentation in drag. But the Black beauty movement in the 60s was a movement within the Civil Rights Act movement that stepped up to go into the communities and talk about how we're being treated just on an individual by individual basis about our hair, and how Black people are forced to assimilate to Caucasian and European beauty standards in order to thrive and succeed in this country. There was a time where and I'm sure stuff like this is still happening, but there was a time where it was very prevalent, where you could not get jobs if you had an afro, if your hair was too thick or looked too coarse, if you wore braids. You could not get a job like that if you wore locks. Speaking of locks, the kid who was forced to cut his locks before competing in a wrestling competition, that video resurfaced on my feed a couple days ago. And I know I had seen it before, but this was just a couple years ago. It's not like this was 20, 30 years ago when this was happening, when a referee forced a kid to cut his dreads off before competing in a competition, and he had his hair covered. You can't tell me that that is not systematic oppression. How? How is my hair affecting your ability to referee, my ability to wrestle, or my opponent's ability to compete with me? I don't know. And on the flip side of that, Black people fell into that narrative that natural textured, that natural hairstyles that are predicated to the Black experience are now ghetto and inappropriate. Like, I remember growing up when I used to hear Black parents say to their kids, no, you can't have braids. You ain't going to school with that ghetto hairstyle. No, you can't have dreads. You ain't having that dirty ghetto hairstyle. No, you can't do this and do that with your hair because you don't want to be looked at as ghetto by them white folks. I don't want them white folks calling my phone about your hair. I was one of those kids that I had to regulate my hair because the people in my life didn't want me to be looked at as less than intelligent because I have a perceived ghetto hairstyle. Now, mind you, my mother eventually broke on that, and she let me try to grow my hair out. Eventually, she broke on that. So, but it's down to our hair. We're already oppressed as a people. We're oppressed in the workplace. We're oppressed. You tried to keep us from getting married, from voting. You tried to keep us out of specific spaces that you deemed only appropriate for white people. You tried to keep us out of schools. Now, the way that we wear our hair in our natural lives is being controlled. So I'm glad that Kathleen Cleaver spoke out about that, and that the Black beauty movement became a thing, because it inspired me all these years later to bring back that movement in the drag community and directly call out people who try to oppress the way that minority queens present or alternative queens present. You know, like I've said before, the majority of the racism that I experienced on a personal level, I experienced through the queer community and through the drag community. But I've watched and witnessed so many forms of racism throughout my life, on television, through other people, through hearing the stories of my peers and my predecessors. Like, I've experienced it all. So for the mandate to even be brought down to black hair is disgusting. Just like with Gabrielle Union on America's Got Talent, the #1 talent on television for this past year. Hold on, let me get a tissue. The #1 black talent on TV gets fired for speaking out about racial issues and sexism issues on the set. And you see how now she's being labeled as difficult to work with. Go back to Monique, and when she was being labeled difficult to work with, and tune into her podcast sometimes and check out the reasons why she was being labeled difficult. She was being labeled difficult because she was standing up for the people who the powers that be brushed to the side and looked over. And Gabrielle Union was doing the exact same thing. She was calling out inappropriate behavior that the powers that be deemed appropriate enough to deal with, but because they had a person of color on the set, because they had a Jamal the intern to tell y'all what the fuck is up, they complied for a little bit. And then they eventually got rid of her ass. But on top of that, it came out that the higher-ups at the network contacted her and reprimanded her about her hair several times throughout the season. Several times throughout the season, right? About her hair. Her hair. What is wrong? How? How, Sway? Make it make sense, baby. Because I don't understand how Gabrielle Union's hair will ever affect her ability to do her job. Clearly, it did not affect her ability to do her job, because with braids, with her afros, with her natural hair, with her black hair, she was able to become, in her first season on the show, the #1 talent on television. So apparently, hair has no jurisdiction on somebody's ability to do their job. The problem is that white people had a problem with her hair. And why she got her hair like that? Why is it so ethnic? But yet nobody got a problem if Kim Kardashian was a guest judge and showed up on that bitch in some motherfucking cornrows, would nobody say shit? Okay? Notice. Nobody said anything when Kim Kardashian showed up with her Bo Derek braids, Fangolly braids, they're actually called, just saying, look it up. Nobody said anything about that, and they actually defended her with Bo Derek. Like, Bo Derek didn't get this motherfucking hairstyle from black people. Like, it wasn't pulled up from somewhere. It's written in black and white. It's contextual context. You can't deny that the shit that is being policed is real. The shit that we are being oppressed for is real. So much so, this is where the development within the last 24 hours is coming in. So much so that I just read an article last night from Madame Noir that presidential candidate Cory Booker has issued a piece of legislation to combat the condemnation and ban the discrimination of black hair. The fact that there has to be legislation put into place to defend black hair drives my point home. Period. Point blank. the Crown Act. So when y'all get y'all asses to the polls, when all y'all black people get y'all ass to the polls like I done told y'all to, make sure y'all vote for the Crown Act, okay? The act stands for Create a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair Act. That says it all. At the end of the day, somebody has to speak up on the issues that are plaguing this country, have plagued this country, and will continue to plague this country until change happens. If a lot of people, just like in my essays with essay that I uploaded today, people kept trying to tell me, you should just ignore them. You should just ignore them. But I see that as enabling. I see that as if you ignore somebody, you're enabling their behavior by not telling them that it's not okay. Because not telling them that okay may send not telling them that it's okay and ignoring them may send a message that you were offended by it, but it sends a message that you're not going to do enough to stop them from committing that action. So in this regard, I appreciate the people who, like I said, I appreciate the positive response, but I also appreciate the negative response, because the negative response puts more of a battery in my back to not only educate y'all, but entertain y'all at the same time. Because I realize that a lot of people are ignorant just because they choose not to do the research. It's not because they don't have access, and it's not because they haven't been taught. Some people have been taught and told, and they just choose not to be. And seeing people get mad at me for speaking up warms my heart. I'm so glad that my words are impacting anybody, let alone people enough to say that I shouldn't be speaking out. That means that the words that I'm saying are touching the people that it needs to be touched, and it's getting out there, and I'm saying the things that need to be said because white people don't want me to say it. So, I'm getting ready to wrap up. That's all I got. Systematic oppression setups have run rampant in this country from the beginning of this country, from its inception. Systematic oppressionary setups have been created to hold back minorities and people of color in this country, and they continue to be enacted and enforced on a daily basis. I need you guys to wake up, do your research, figure out what it is that we have been subjected to all these years, and start speaking up and doing your part to combat it. Because our voices are loud. Our voices are impactful. Black women in Alabama proved that. Black voters proved that in 2008 and 2012. You know what I'm saying? The Black Lives Matter movement has proved that. The Civil Rights Act and the Civil Rights Movement has proved that. But I believe that the people of my generation and the people of the upcoming generation need to become as visceral as our predecessors and the people whose shoulders that we stand on, because I think that now we're being raised in this disguised society of freedom that a lot of us don't realize the oppression that we're under until we're older. A lot of people don't see what America really is until it's too late, or until, it's never too late to start fighting for what you believe in, so I won't say too late. But a lot of people realize the oppression that we're under, and it hits them like a ton of bricks. It's like that thing when you go out in the world, when you grown and you turn 18 and your parents ship you out there in the world, and you start to see all the things that they told you were coming your way, but you didn't believe. This is one of those warnings for you, because America is still racist. America is still prejudiced. America is still restrictive of Black people. It's changing and it's trying to change. But like I keep saying, we are not far enough removed from the oppression that has been enacted from the inception of this country to see real change that is going to affect us not only on a government basis, on a legislative basis, but all across the board, on a day-to-day interaction basis with other people, in the news, in the media, on social media. Like, there's so many places where we need to come together, unify our community so that we can unite our environment. And with that being said, that's all I got. I'm about to wrap up. I'm getting ready to clock out. I hope y'all enjoyed the video. I'm sorry about getting cut off earlier. Make sure y'all LSS, like, share, subscribe, be a legend statement and a star, and like, share, subscribe. I said that because I don't want the ballroom community coming at me talking about, that's not what LSS stands for. That's not what LSS stands for. I know what LSS stands for. I come from the ballroom community, okay? LSS stands for Legend Statements and Stars, but I am somebody who wants to unite all of my communities, Black, queer. We're all marginalized, so we all deserve to be in the same room together. So I shorten like, share, subscribe to LSS as a way to pay homage to the ballroom community on just a subtle level. So be a legend statement and star, and like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell, do all of the things that your favorite YouTubers tell you to do on their channels, and make sure you tune into other YouTubers that are talking about these types of subjects, like Funky Dineva, like Troy's TV, and Destin Troy's. Same person, but he has 2 different channels. But like Funky Dineva and Troy's TV, those are really the only people that I see talking about these issues in any context. You know what I'm saying? They aren't necessarily dedicating specific videos to this, but I do have to go back and watch the video that Troy's TV uploaded last night about why white women aren't allowed to wear braids. He's had some unpopular opinions about Black people not owning any hairstyle and this, that, and the third, but he has acknowledged the cultural bias and the cultural oppression that has been put on Black hair. So I can accept that. Tune into In My Queer View, tune into In My Queer View, tune into Essays with Essay. I just recorded another episode of that. I've been recording them a little bit more often because I've been finding things that have a visceral reaction in my mind and in my psyche that don't necessarily have to do with the Black experience or the queer experience, or they may have to do with both, or it's just things that I'm going through that I want to talk about. So a POC POV is Monday, Wednesday, Friday. In My Queer View is Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Essays with Essay is whenever I have something on my heart and I need to talk to y'all. So thank you guys so much. Make sure you click all the links in the description box to read up on all of the points that we covered in today's video. Make sure you, once again, be a legend, statement, and star, and like, share, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell. Make sure you guys hit me in the comments and in my inboxes with all of your questions, suggestions, stories, personal experiences, opinions, all of those things. I want to hear it all. I read everything, and I appreciate all people who have something to say and can contribute to this topic. So yeah, that's about it. I'm getting ready to clock out. I hope y'all enjoyed the video. I hope y'all enjoyed all the episodes. Make sure you go catch up on all the other shows and tune in. Thank y'all for coming. Peace.